Imagine you have 80 IKEA cabinets to put together, each with a ton of screws. You could get through it with a screwdriver, but it'd probably be easier to use a power drill. Well, you know that execute JavaScript trigger in Storyline, the one you skip because you're not a coder? Well, that's a power drill, and you don't need to be a coder to use it. And today I'll show you 4 simple ways to use it that'll save you hours of work so that you can unlock that power for yourself and build impressive interactions that'll blow your clients away. Now, I want to be clear, you never need JavaScript to make any of the things I show you on this channel or in this program. Just like you don't need a power drill to assemble a cabinet, it's just way faster with it. So let's dive in. First, picking things at random. This is easy to do in Storyline. Just pick a number between 1 and 100, for example. But if you want to pick something that's not a number, it gets crazy in a hurry. Say I want to pick a country at random and ask the learner what the capital is. So here's my question. What's the capital of country? I'm going to ask Storyline to pick this country at random, and it's also going to pick the answer, which is capital, but that's not going to be shown. Then when I type my answer here and I click submit, it's going to check that the answer that I put in is the same as capital. Storyline can only pick numbers, so to do this with triggers, I have to pick a number at random. Let's say I've only got 5 countries in my set, so I pick a number from 1 to 5. Then based on that number, I'm going to set the country. If the number is 1, the country is Australia. If it's 2, it's Albania, and so on. I'm also going to set the capital. 1 is Canberra, 2 is Tirana, etc. Once those variables are set, I jump automatically to the question. I'm going to ask all the countries, so my max score is 5. So I've already got 2 triggers for each country, and if I want to add a country, I have to add 2 triggers, 1 for country and 1 for capital, change this max score to 6, and change this number so that it's now picking between 1 and 6. If you have 30 countries or 100, just no. Now here's how to do the same thing with execute JavaScript. You always start with this line, let player get player. That tells the script here that whenever I say player in this window, I mean Storyline. I call it player, but you could call it anything. It doesn't matter. Actually, you know what? I'll call it Storyline since that's what we're talking about. Then I just give it a list of countries and a list of capitals. The capitals are listed in the same order as their countries. This will be important later. Next, I'm going to set my max score automatically. So Storyline set var means set the variable in Storyline. The variable that I want to set is max score, and I want the value to be whatever length my list of countries is. So this list has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries, so 5 is going to be my max score. And then I will save these 2 lists into memory. That's what these 2 lines are doing here. So this is taking the list countries and saving it under the name countries. Same for capitals. I'm doing that so that if I ever use another execute JavaScript trigger elsewhere, I don't have to write out these lists again. I'll just refer back to countries and capitals. So now the game is set up. If I want to add a country, I just have to add it to the lists here. Argentina, Buenos Aires. Done. Now my max score is automatically going to be 6 and not 5 because it's based on the length of this list. Okay, once that runs, I'll jump to the question slide where I'm going to run another script. That one picks a country at random. So first, let Storyline get player, as usual. Then I'm going to load the countries and their capitals. So now it has my 2 lists in memory and it can do stuff with them. Here, I'm telling it to pick a number at random between 1 and whatever the length of this list is. 6. Call that random number picked number. Let's say it picks number 2. Storyline set var again means set the variable in Storyline, and the Storyline variable I want to set is country, and for the value I'm saying take that list of countries and look up what country is in that position you just picked, number 2. That's Albania. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the capitals. Look up what capital is in that position, number 2. That's Tirana. That's why it's important that the capitals be listed in the same order as their countries. Now when I run this, I get the exact same result as I do with the triggers, but it's way cleaner. I have a lot fewer triggers with JavaScript, and as you saw, it's much easier to add a country. I just add it to the list. You'll notice that sometimes the same question gets asked more than once, and that's trick number 2, picking at random without replacement, meaning once something is picked, it's taken out of the set. If you want to do this with triggers, you can create a true-false variable for each country, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when one of them is asked, you set the variable to true. And I have to make one of those triggers for each question. Then every time it picks a country, we'll check to see if it's been asked before. We'll say jump to this slide if I've picked number 1 and it's been asked. If so, it'll jump back here and pick again and repeat until it finds one that hasn't been asked. So that adds one more trigger per country to check that here when I'm picking, and one trigger per country here to say, okay, that question's been asked now. If you're keeping track, we have now 4 triggers per country. But to do this with JavaScript, all I need is to add 2 short lines. Remember this second script where I load up my lists and pick a country? Well, all I have to do is take the country out of the list once it's been picked. And to do that, I'm going to say splice the list countries, which means take something out of it. This is saying take one element out at this address, pick number. So now it's taking Albania out of the list. Same thing with capitals. And that's it. Now when it saves the lists, it's going to save the new shortened versions. And every time it comes back here to pick a new question, it will load that list of remaining countries, pick from those, then take that country out until they've all been asked and there's nothing left. And that's how you can pick at random without repetition. The next thing JavaScript allows me to do is to do math in a more human way. Storyline can do math, but it forces you to think in a weird way. For example, a learner gets 5 questions out of 6 and I want to convert that to a percentage. The human way to think about this is to divide the score by the max score. 5 divided by 6, then multiply by 100, and you get 83%. But that doesn't actually work in Storyline. In Storyline, if you divide your score by your max score, the score changes. It becomes 0.83. And I don't want to change the score. They got 5 questions right. That doesn't change. So instead, you set percent equal to score, then you divide percent by max score, multiply percent by 100, and you'll get the right percentage. It's weird because percent is the result I'm after. It's not the thing I'm dividing. And it can get really difficult to think that way when your math is more complicated than just a fraction. Now in JavaScript, first let's get the variables from Storyline, score and max score. Then we'll say set the Storyline variable percent, and the value should be score divided by max score with the whole thing multiplied by 100. This here is much closer to how I actually think about the math. And finally, trick number 4, finding bugs quickly. Raise your hand if you've ever screamed at Storyline because it wasn't working and you couldn't figure out why. So this is my triggers version with 5 questions, and right now there's a bug in this program. Once I've asked the 5 questions, it's supposed to jump to the end with my final score, but it's just hanging. Why? If I'm not using JavaScript, debugging means going slide by slide and checking all the triggers and often adding text boxes to display my variables and to try and catch the error. With JavaScript, you can drop any message you want to yourself as the program is running so that you know what it's doing under the hood. So let's see why it's hanging when 5 questions are asked. Every time I ask a question, it's increasing this count. So first, let's make sure that that's updating properly. So every time I arrive on this question slide, I want a message that tells me the value of this variable. Execute JavaScript, and let's grab the value of this variable questions asked, then console.log, that means send me a message, and in between apostrophes, I can write anything. Number of questions asked, plus, that means and, the variable questions asked. This will run every time this slide starts. Let's try it. To see these secret messages, I just hit F12 on my browser and select console. In preview mode, you can also click this icon here and you'll get the console. Questions asked is showing up every time I arrive on the question slide and this script runs. That seems to be working just fine. It's updating. So now let's look at the setup to see if that's where the bug is. In this version of the program, it's coming to this first slide, picking a country, and then jumping to the question back and forth like that. If it picks one that's already been asked, it reloads the slide and tries to pick again. So I'm going to have it print a message in the console whenever that happens. So on this picking slide, execute JavaScript, console.log, and just say picking a country. This will print every time it tries to pick a new country. Let's try it. Okay, so I'm just going to test it in preview mode this time. Inspect, I've got the console, and it picked a country already. So it doesn't really matter what I write here. Picked a country. You see here it had to pick 3 times this time because it probably picked countries that it already asked. Okay. It had to pick twice to find one that it hadn't asked. It's getting harder and harder because there are fewer and fewer that haven't been asked. And now, look at that. It's picked 226 times and it still hasn't found one. That's the problem. So the issue is that when I check here to see if all the questions have been asked. I'm doing that on the question slide when I should be doing it here. So let's grab this trigger and just move it to the picking slide right at the beginning. And that way, it's not going to keep jumping back. If it comes here and all the questions have been asked, it's just going to jump away to the end. It's not just going to keep going. So that check is being performed before it even tries to pick a question. So now when I try it, I'm speeding this up. It's working. It's not hanging anymore. You'll notice that I demoed this in my trigger-based version. I did that to show you that you can use console log even if you're not using JavaScript anywhere else in your program. It'll help you debug anything, JavaScript or not. See? No programming degree required. These tricks save time, they reduce clutter, and they help you update really quick, which your clients will love you for. And if you want to design gamified training that actually sticks, check out my effective gamification framework. It's made for instructional designers like you who want to create engaging, effective training without the guesswork. The link is below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.